We've been talking, ladies and gentlemen, about a nation of criminals, how many laws we have, how many laws that the police have to enforce. Well, let me tell you the result of some of the laws, some of these regulations. George Floyd arrested for allegedly having passed counterfeit $120 bill. Eric Garner was arrested for selling single cigarettes without paying city taxes. 18-year-old Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson for stealing one box of cigars, August 2014. And a man named Walter Scott was pulled over in South Carolina for a defective light on his car. He was shot and killed. But in addition to that, we've got thousands of arrests, many for curfew violations, for failure to disperse. Well, enough is enough. Those are the words of George Floyd's brother. And still the protests continue, along with mounting charges of police brutality. But we've got to cut out the laws. And what should we do to help the police? I heard somebody yesterday, they asked this expert, what is the one thing they should do? And it's something that I'd already said. It's very simple. You need to hire better people. You need to pay them properly to attract the best. And then there needs to be continuous money for training, continuous training of the police forces. You don't want to defund the police, but even some top Democrats are saying it will only make matters much worse. So what action is the president taking? Our Jenna Browder has that story.
The White House confirms the president will travel to Dallas today for a roundtable with faith leaders, law enforcement, and small business owners. They'll be talking about police reform and race relations.
Let's go! Thursday's trip comes after President Trump met Wednesday with African-American faith leaders at the White House and after House hearings Wednesday on police brutality.
George wasn't hurting anyone that day.
Philonise Floyd, George Floyd's brother, testifying about the pain he felt watching his brother die, helpless on the ground while begging for his mother.
He didn't deserve to die over $20. I'm asking you, is that what a black man is worth? $20? This is 2020. Enough is enough. The people marching in the streets are telling you enough is enough.
Democrats and Republicans with the White House are working on police reform measures as some on the left push to defund the police. Facing increasing pressure to weigh in, Joe Biden told CBS News Monday he does not support the idea. Other opponents include Senators Cory Booker and Bernie Sanders. Former NFL player, investment banker, and minister Jack Brewer also took issue with it Wednesday on CBN's Faith Nation.
The communities that need law and order the most are the underserved communities, the mothers that are single, the elderly people who don't have the resources to protect themselves. If you go into the community, right, and you go in and you ask the families in these communities that are underserved, they're going to tell you that they need more police, not less.
Pastor Darrell Scott also warned about the dangers of taking away resources from police departments, pointing to what's happened in cities like Cleveland, where police budgets and presence have been cut.
The murder rates have climbed. The property crime is at record levels. Aggravated robbery statistics are higher. Drug sales, drug use, drug abuse is higher. Drug and alcohol-related motor vehicle accidents are the highest they've ever been.
Brewer says real change starts with faith and family.
And the problems start from fatherlessness. Our father and our family units, particularly in the black community, have been ripped apart. And so what you're seeing now is you're seeing that, you're 5 times more likely to go to prison if you don't have a father in the house. It starts with our family, with Christian values, and stop trying to push out all of the godly principles that our country was founded on. We got to get the fear of God back in our police department, in our communities, in our kids. And I think that's our answer.
In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thank you, Jenna. Again, I want to emphasize the fact we've got too many laws. Hundreds of thousands of criminal offenses. We're locking up. We have more people incarcerated in America than any other nation on the face of the earth. This is something wrong, and you talk about hurting the black community. Can you imagine what happens? You've got some 18-year-old who doesn't quite know what's going on. He gets busted. He goes to jail. He becomes a felon. The rest of his life, he's stigmatized. He cannot get the appropriate job. He cannot register. He cannot vote. He cannot do all these other things. We've stigmatized a whole nation of people, and this so-called tough on crime, 3 strikes and you're out, you give somebody a life sentence. It's horrible what we've done. But these minor regulations are what has led to the killing of some of these people, and it's given the police a license to arrest, to harass, and in some cases to kill people. It's wrong. How do you want to straighten it out? Well, you begin by cutting out all the laws that are causing these problems. And all these regulations, hundreds of thousands of laws that criminalize America. Well, in other news, violence and vandalism are spreading throughout the nation in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And now 2 major statues here in the capital of Virginia have been torn down. John Jessup has that.
That's right, Pat. Those events happened in the Old Dominion State city of Richmond yesterday. Police were on the scene late last night as the crowd brought down the statue of Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy. Cheering could be heard as it was hauled away. Protesters also tore down a statue of Christopher Columbus, set it on fire, then threw it into a lake. It's all happening as President Trump says his administration will not even consider renaming military bases named after Confederate generals. And his press secretary reinforced that message.
These monumental and very powerful bases have become part of a great American heritage and a history of winning, victory, and freedom.
And Pat, there are 10 Army bases named after Confederate soldiers.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been reading a biography of George Washington, the father of our country. He not only owned many slaves, he bought and sold slaves. He was a slave owner. Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. So are we going to rename Washington? Let's call the capital Federal City instead of naming it after a slave owner. Do we want to go into the Jefferson Monument and tear down the statue of Thomas Jefferson, who was a major slave owner? Do we want to do that to this whole country? Can you imagine? They're tearing down statues of Columbus. Shall we name the capital of Ohio instead of Columbus, calling it Buckeye City? Shall we go into Georgia and name Columbus, Georgia, the Peach City? I mean, what are we doing? We are going to destroy this nation. And then you can begin to say, well, you got San Francisco. That's named after St. Francis. That violates the separation of church and state. And then Los Angeles is named after the angels. And then El Paso, I mean, Santa Fe is named Holy Faith. And we can't have that. That's, breaches. That's taking religion, and it's unconstitutional. If we continue this nonsense, we could completely tear the fabric of this nation. But just think, just because several hundred years ago people had one way of living, now they've changed that way of living and we've gotten more enlightened. But we don't tear up the fabric of this society. But again, we're going to throw down statues of Columbus. But then you take away the name of the capital of Ohio, Columbus. We're going to do that. Buckeye State. My wife is from the Buckeye State. She was born in Columbus. I don't know if they like that very much. But Terry, I mean, they've gone into Richmond. They've taken down statues, but they want to rename Fort Bragg. They want to rename all these. It
would be wonderful if we could, in agreement, come together and work toward what all of that history, you mentioned we're in a new time today. Mm-hmm. We are enlightened. So let's move forward with further enlightenment. Let's move forward with unity. You know, we talk so much about without unity, divided, it will fall. Anything will fall, not just our country, but anything.
These heroes of ours have built the greatest country on the face of the earth. And, so they may have had some moral failings, but nevertheless, they did great things. Robert E. Lee, for example, I went to a college called Washington and Lee. It was named after George Washington, who gave a grant, and then Robert E. Lee was the president. And Lee was a model of gentility, of courtliness, And he happened to, I might add, to have freed all the slaves he had. He was really moving, and he used to worship in a black and white church. I mean, he was a man who loved people, and yet they want to take down, I mean, they've got a statue of him in Richmond. They just took that statue of Robert E. Lee down. I mean, he was a great hero. As a matter of fact, he was the superintendent of West Point and was asked by Lincoln to head the federal forces in the Civil War. And he declined to do it because he was a Virginian. But I mean, these people they're lovely people. And yes, I know they had some flaws, but Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, these great men that gave us this country that is so wonderful, the strongest nation on the face of the earth, we're going to tear down their memory and rename everything. Christopher Columbus, we're going to change Columbus, Ohio again, make it the Buckeye capital. Yeah. I mean,
I think our history has been, as you said, there have been some things that have been flaws along the way for certain. We can focus on the flaws or we can focus on the future.
Well, Columbus was a man who loved God, but when he got into the West Indies, he let things get out of hand, and he began to oppress some of the natives. But that doesn't mean we denigrate his memory. But anyhow, I'm talking too much about this. They tell me it's time to wrap up. But folks, let's be careful before we destroy the fabric of the greatest nation on earth on account of a few bad police officers. Let's take a step back, breathe hard, and then consider slowly what it is we're doing. But remember, we still got the greatest nation on the face of the earth. Let's celebrate it. Let's not tear it apart. John?
Pat, as the economy recovers from the damage caused by the coronavirus lockdowns, the Federal Reserve is signaling that it is going to help it come back by keeping the key short-term interest rate near zero through the year 2022, and that's with the goal of encouraging businesses and consumers to borrow money and to help keep them spending, which consequently will strengthen the economy.
We are committed to using our full range of tools to support the economy in this challenging time. In March, we quickly lowered our policy interest rate to near zero, where we expect to keep it until we are confident that the economy has weathered recent events and is on track to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals.
The stock market has rebounded sharply from the lows of the coronavirus sell-off in late March, with the Nasdaq closing above 10,000 for the first time ever Wednesday, although some analysts do expect a pullback. Well, turning to Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to annex parts of the biblical lands of Judea and Samaria, now called the West Bank, is coming under fire. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell brings us that story from Jerusalem.
The European Union, Arab states, and others have criticized Israel for its plan to annex Israeli communities in the West Bank. The German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas added his voice Wednesday in a visit to Jerusalem.
We are of the opinion that annexation would not be compatible with international law, and that is why we continue to stand by a negotiated, consensual two-state solution.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu set July 1st as the deadline for annexation. It was originally part of President Trump's deal of the century peace plan. Now the U.S. administration is sending mixed signals on the timing. One factor, they want to make sure that alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz is fully on board before implementing the plan on the ground. Maas stopped short of saying how Germany or the EU would respond.
In our view, we are now at a time when diplomacy and negotiations must be given a second chance.
Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh warned of serious consequences if the plan goes ahead.
This annexation is a total erosion of our national aspirations. The annexation is a total erosion of the geographic base of the future Palestinian state. And the world has to choose between international law and annexation.
Some Israeli community leaders in Judea and Samaria warned the plan would lead to a Palestinian state that still supports terror. But Oded Revivi, mayor of Efrat, a large settlement near Jerusalem, told CBN News these are the times to seize an historic opportunity.
The Trump deal is a vision for peace to try and create a better atmosphere in this region. The legal concept is applying Israeli law where Jews live today, which basically would mean that our status will equal to the status of the rest of the residents of Israel.
Israelis returned in earnest to Judea and Samaria after 2,000 years as a result of its victory in the 1967 Six-Day War. Palestinians want all of it as a future state. The coming weeks will be crucial in determining who controls this land. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Pat, back to you.
If you ask the PLO and you ask the Palestinian Authority, do they recognize the legitimacy of the State of Israel? The answer is no, they don't. And when you get to the core of it, they just believe that Israel is an illegitimate cancer that has appeared in the middle of the Middle East, and they want to destroy it. Iran says the same thing. And so the truth is, Judea and Samaria are part of the historic homeland of the Jewish people, and what is called the West Bank. If the Israelis want to govern it, it should be theirs. It at one time was under Jordanian authority, and that may have been a good solution, that they would have Jordanian citizenship. But the idea of a two-state solution, of one state that believes that the other one should be destroyed, it's not going to work. And so it's time, really, if the Israelis want to do that, and Benny Gantz is on board with Netanyahu, then they ought to go ahead and take over Judea and Samaria. It's the so-called West Bank. It's an integral part of what used to be called Israel. And they can't have a two-state solution. It's not going to work. John?
Pat, in health news, the American Cancer Society is updating its guidelines on cancer prevention. Their recommendations? Get more exercise, consume less red meat and alcohol, avoid processed food and sugary drinks, and eat more fruits and vegetables. All of that, Pat, can cut the risk of developing cancer by nearly 20%.
Well, it looks like the American Cancer Society is on board with what we've been saying over and over again. Fruits and vegetables, and build up your gut, your immune system with probiotics and prebiotics, and stay away from sugary drinks, stay away from carbonated drinks, stay away from so-called sugar-free or diet drinks that'll hurt you, and don't eat too much red meat.
Yeah.
You make healthy.
That's right. You've been doing that for a long time.
If you don't exercise, it's the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
Really?
I try to exercise every other day. I let my muscles rest one day, then I go, today is my day to exercise, so I'm going at it again. All right?
Be aware, muscles. The attack is about to begin.
I'm going to hit you again hard, so get ready.